Building out every character from Smash Bros as a Dungeons & Dragons playable character did lead me back down the path of Xenoblade. And now I gotta build Pyra and Mythra, but somehow at the same time. I could make it easy on myself and just make 2 different builds, but that's too easy. We need to be able to cover both of them in the same build, because they cover the same fighter slot in Smash Bros, and in Xenoblade they're connected to the same driver, which is Rex. They've always been able to freely switch places. Pyra is just another personality that Mythra created. But just like any other JRPG, the lore gets weird. So let's just go ahead and start with the build, starting with the species. Mythra and Pyra are both what's known as an Aegis, otherwise known as a blade. So they're definitely not human. They're actually created as a summonable blade to bring into battle. So with that in mind, since they're both blades, I'm not going to go with human, despite their general look. Instead, I'm going to go with a Warforged. Warforged do get some pretty good perks. They get resistance to poison damage and advantage against the poisoned condition. They get integrated protection, so they automatically get a +1 bonus to their armor class. They get Sentry's Rest, so they can finish a long rest in 6 hours and they can't be forced to go to sleep. And they get a feature called Tireless, so they don't gain exhaustion from dehydration, malnutrition, or suffocation. When it comes to a background, the real challenge in this build is being able to cover both Mythra and Pyra, because Pyra is very fire focused, just being so aligned with the element of fire. Mythra is much more about light based attacks and insane speed. And while I don't want to spoil anything, throughout this build we're actually going to have a tiny bit more trouble when it comes to covering Pyra, which is a bit of a surprise. Getting fire based stuff in D&D doesn't seem that difficult. But there's going to be a lot more easier ways to cover Mythra. So in order to cover all of our bases, we're going to grab the background, House Lyrindar Air. And while this is going to help our ability scores in a good way, it really just gave us one spell that I wanted to be able to grab, because it gives us a whole bunch of stuff like adding a 1d4 to an acrobatics check. It gives us resistance to lightning damage. It gives us the Thunderclap cantrip. And frankly, we don't care about any of that. The most important thing is that it expands our spell list with the Mark of Storm spells. And even most of those spells I don't really care about. There's just one spell that it gives us access to, which is a level 4 spell that I really want. And it's the spell Conjure Minor Elementals. This allows us to add elemental damage to any of our attacks. It adds 2d8 acid, cold, fire, or lightning. We want to be able to utilize the fire portion. And we get an extra 1d8 for every level of upcast beyond the 4th level. Then on top of that, anything within 15 feet of you is in difficult terrain. We really just wanted to be able to add that 2d8 fire damage. There are plenty of other great fire spells I would love to grab, but a lot of them are pretty hard to get unless you focus your builds around making sure you can get them. And we're not going to get those. So I just wanted to cover my bases as much as possible. This makes it so now we can do some fiery attacks with our sword, covering a good chunk of what we needed for Pyra. But now it's time to dive into our actual class. Pyra and Mythra are both connected to something else. They have a driver because they're blades, and that connection feels like a Warlock. So that's what we're going to go with. When you become a Warlock, you have to choose an Eldritch Invocation right away. This is how you connect to your patron very early on, because it allows you to choose a pact. And since they're both blades, they use swords, that's kind of their thing. We're going to go with Pact of the Blade. This allows you to conjure a simple or martial melee weapon, which you are automatically proficient with. So we can grab either a longsword or a greatsword. Then we can use our charisma modifier instead of strength or dexterity for the attack and damage rolls. The weapon can deal its normal damage, but it can also deal necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage instead. And radiant damage aligns pretty darn well with Mythra. Then at first level of Warlock, we get access to Pact Magic. Pact Magic works a little bit differently than any other spellcaster in D&D, because Warlocks get access to a very limited amount of spell slots. In fact, they only get 1 spell slot right now, and then they get 2 spell slots at level 2, and they don't get a 3rd spell slot to use until level 11. Finally maxing out at a whopping 4 spell slots at level 17 of Warlock. But the trick about this is that their spell slots recharge on a short rest. And those spell slots are always at the maximum level available. So just like any other spellcaster, Warlocks get access to higher level spellcasting as they level up. But all of the Warlock spell slots are always going to be at the highest level available. But let's run through some of the spells we want to grab. As far as cantrips, we'll grab all the sword-based stuff. Grab Booming Blade for a basic sword hit hard kind of attack, Sword Burst to hit every creature within 5 feet of you, and then focusing on Pyra, we'll grab Green Flame Blade, dealing some fire damage and hitting a nearby creature. And then for Mythra, we can grab True Strike. This won't do much now, but at later levels, you can actually add some additional radiant damage. When it comes to a first level spell, we can really only focus on Pyra here and grab Hellish Rebuke. Deal some damage to somebody that attacked you, and that damage is fire damage. Second level of Warlock gives us Magical Cunning. So instead of waiting for a short rest while everybody else has to wait for a long rest to recharge your spell slots, now if you really need those spell slots back, you can spend 1 minute to get half of your spell slots back rounded up. But you can only do this once per long rest. Also at second level, you get to choose 2 more Eldritch Invocations. There's not many that really fit very well, but we're going to be on the front lines a lot, so we want some extra health. So we're going to grab the Eldritch Invocation, Lessons of the First Ones. This allows us to choose an Origin feat. So we're going to grab Tough, giving us an extra 2 hit points of health per level of this overall build. Then we're going to grab Eldritch Mind. This allows us to have advantage on Constitution saving throws to maintain concentration on spells. And then at third level of Warlock, we get access to second level spells, so we're going to grab Misty Step to replicate the insane speed of Mythra, which is just allowing us to teleport as a bonus action. And then since we're doing so many sword attacks, we'll grab Hold Person. This allows us to do critical strikes because we're going to have advantage on attacks against whoever's afflicted by Hold Person because that person becomes paralyzed, and melee attacks against a paralyzed creature are automatically critical hits. Then at third level, we get to choose a Warlock subclass. And this was kind of the hardest choice. There's an argument that could be made for maybe a Fiend Patron to get more of Pyra's stuff because they're much more fire-based, but that patron is very demonic and most of the features don't really fit. It just gives us more fire spells. There's another great option with a Celestial Warlock, especially because it has a feature called Radiant Soul. So if you deal radiant or fire damage, you can add your Charisma modifier to the damage. This would be super fitting for both Pyra and Mythra, and it would even give us an additional spell with Wall of Fire. But that subclass is very heavily focused on healing, and outside of that tiny Pyra stuff, it definitely leans way more into Mythra's Radiant stuff, which we want to avoid leaning too much more into because we're already going to be forced to do it a bit more anyways. But one thing both Pyra and Mythra have in common is their blades. And we can cover that concept really easy by taking Xanathar's Guide to Everything's good old classic Hexblade. By choosing a Hexblade, we get to expand our spell list. We get some smite-based spells, which are all about hitting with a weapon and dealing tons more damage. But it also really focuses on us being in melee by giving us spells like Shield, boosting our armor class by 5 as a reaction. It also gives us the feature Hex Warrior. So now you can actually wear medium armor, which feels a bit more fitting for the characters. But the biggest boost is that we get the feature Hexblade's Curse. So as a bonus action, you can choose one creature you can see within 30 feet of you. That target becomes cursed for 1 minute. The curse ends early if the target dies or you die, but it gives you some pretty big benefits. First, you gain bonus to damage rolls against the cursed target. That bonus damage is equal to your proficiency bonus, which is going to be a pretty considerable boost. Then, any attack roll you make against the cursed target does a critical hit on a 19 or 20. And this actually fits really well with both Pyra and Mythra because in the Xenoblade game, they have an ability to boost up their critical chance. Then finally, if the cursed target dies, you regain hit points equal to your Warlock level plus your Charisma modifier. But you can only use this feature once per short or long rest. Then there's one other spell I gotta mention because you did get access to second level spells, and the Hexblade expanded spell list will give you both Blur, forcing disadvantage on attack rolls against you, but it can also give you Branding Smite. It's a smite-based damage booster that you can add on to your melee attack, but it deals radiant damage, aligning pretty well with Mythra. Then at 4th level of Warlock, we get an ability score improvement, and these are our starting ability scores. So we're going to round out our Constitution and Charisma, adding 1 point into each of them. Then at 5th level of Warlock, we get to choose some more Eldritch Invocations, and we're focusing on the sword-based attacks. So we're going to grab Thirsting Blade, allowing us to attack twice per attack action, And we'll also grab Eldritch Smite. So once per turn, when you hit a creature with a packed weapon, you can expend a packed magic spell slot to deal an extra 1d8 force damage plus another 1d8 per level of the spell slot. And if the target is huge or smaller, they're knocked prone. So you can now attack twice, adding your proficiency bonus to the damage of each of those attacks, and you can do an Eldritch Smite to boost up some damage pretty considerably whenever you feel like it, as long as you have the spell slots to spare. But also at this level, your spell slots get upgraded to 3rd level. And there's only one more spell we definitely have to grab from the Hexblade expanded spell list, which is Elemental Weapon. So now we can enchant our weapon, making it deal some fire damage, which is pretty necessary. Then we also probably want to grab something like Thunder Step. It's another way to boom out as you're teleporting, just focusing on the insane speed of Mythra. 6th level of being a Hexblade Warlock allows us to harvest the soul of a creature we destroy, which probably doesn't really fit as well with the character. Then at 7th level of Warlock, we get access to 4th level spells. So we can grab Elemental Bane to enhance the elemental damage we're dealing with our fire-based stuff for Pyra, Dimension Door to get a bit more teleportation, focusing on the insane speed of Mythra, and then we can actually use that Mark of the Storm spell with Conjure Minor Elementals, boosting up our fire damage pretty massively. And finally, we get one more Eldritch Invocation. And since we're focusing a lot on Smash characters, Smash is a fighting game where you have to try and not fall off of a big platform. So to be able to jump back onto that platform a little easier, we're going to grab Otherworldly Leap. It allows you to cast Jump on yourself at will. 8th level of Warlock gives us another ability score improvement, so let's go ahead and just max out that Charisma. 9th level of Warlock gives us access to 5th level spells. So there's actually 4 different spells that are absolutely amazing here. First, we're basically going to be upgrading Misty Step. We don't want to get rid of Misty Step because you can cast it as a bonus action, but there's a definite upgrade spell that you can use in its place called Far Step. It requires concentration, so if you're already concentrating on a spell, I wouldn't really use it, but Far Step essentially allows you to cast Misty Step, but you can concentrate on it and do so repeatedly as every bonus action, really amping up the insane speed of Mythra. And honestly, all the spells we're going to grab here are going to be focused on Mythra except for one. The next one is a pretty big radiant damage spell as you let radiant damage rain down on your enemies with the spell Jalarzi's Storm of Radiance. You unleash a storm of flashing light and raging thunder. It slams down in a 10-foot radius, dealing 2d10 radiant damage and 2d10 thunder damage. And you can concentrate on this, raining down that damage anytime a creature enters that space or ends its turn there. And while they're within that area, any creature is blinded and deafened and can't cast spells with a verbal component because the thunder is just so damn loud. Then for one last Mythra-based spell, we'll grab Wall of Light. It's just a big radiant thing dealing radiant damage and blinding enemies. But for one spell that works for both of them, we'll grab Hold Monster. It's basically the same as Hold Person, but you can target more types of creatures other than just humanoids. Also at 9th level, you get to choose another Eldritch Invocation. So we're going to grab Life Drinker. This is a very Pact of the Blade focused invocation. So once per turn when you hit a creature with a packed weapon, you can deal an extra 1d6 necrotic, psychic, or radiant damage. And when you do so, you can expend one of your hit point dice, roll it, and regain the number of hit points you rolled plus your constitution modifier. It's just another feature that leans into Mythra because it's more radiant damage. 10th level of being a Hexblade Warlock gives you the feature Armor of Hexes. So if the target of your Hexblade's curse hits you with an attack roll, you can use your reaction to roll a d6, and on a 4 or higher, the attack just misses you. It doesn't matter if they rolled a critical hit, it's just gonna miss. 11th level of Warlock, for most spellcasters, gives you access to 6th level spells. But Warlock spells max out at 5th level, so to substitute that, they get a feature called Mystic Arcana. It's a higher level spell that they can only cast once per day, so it won't recharge on the short rest with everything else. So to get a bit more of the Pyra side of you, we're going to grab Investiture of Flame. This makes you immune to fire damage and resistant to cold damage. Any creature that moves within 5 feet of you for the first time on their turn, or ends its turn within 5 feet of you, takes 1d10 fire damage, and you can use your action to create a line of fire 15 feet long and 5 feet wide, dealing 4d8 fire damage. 12th level of Warlock gives us access to an ability score improvement, so let's just go ahead and throw 2 points into Constitution, and we get access to another Eldritch Invocation. And we're going to grab Devouring Blade. This makes it so you can now attack 3 times with your attack action. And considering you can boost up that damage in so many ways, especially with Conjure Minor Elementals, that is a pretty big damage boost. Because you can attack 3 times, you can add your Charisma modifier thanks to Pact of the Blade, you can add your proficiency bonus to each of those attacks because of the Hexblade's curse, and you can add a bunch of fire damage to each of those attacks with Conjure Minor Elementals if you're playing the more Pyra side. But since we got a bunch of Pyra stuff at 13th level of Warlock, you get another Mystic Arcanum of 7th level, so let's grab something else for Mythra's side by grabbing the spell Crown of Stars. This allows you to summon 7 motes of light above your head, and every bonus action you can send one of those motes of light out, dealing 4d12 radiant damage. 14th level of Warlock gives you Master of Hexes, so you can spread your Hexblade's curse now. So when the target of your Hexblade curse dies, you can actually move the curse to another creature within 30 feet of the original target. The only downside here is that you don't regain hit points if you do this. 15th level of Warlock gives us access to another Eldritch Invocation. There's not much that really fits here, so I'm just going to grab Witch Sight. It requires level 15, and it gives you True Sight within a range of 30 feet. Also at 15th level, we get another Mystic Arcanum. There's not many spells that really fit though, so we're just going to grab Power Word Stun, which is a spell that if a target has 150 hit points or fewer, it is stunned. There's no saving throw, it's just if you're under 150, you're just stunned. But if you're over 150 health, that target's speed becomes 0 until the start of your next turn. But if that target does become stunned, the target continues to be stunned unless it can succeed on a Constitution saving throw at the end of each of its turns. So this can last a very long time. 16th level of Warlock gives us another ability score improvement. So let's just go ahead and max out our Constitution. 17th level of Warlock gives us another Mystic Arcanum, giving us a 9th level spell. And a very notable ability of Mythra is her Foresight. She can see things coming at her. And Foresight is a spell in D&D that does exactly that. It lasts 8 hours, doesn't require concentration, gives you advantage on literally anything that requires a D20 check, and it forces disadvantage on all attack rolls against you. But now that we've hit 17th level in Warlock, I feel like we're leaning a little bit more towards Mythra, and I want to boost up Pyra a little bit if we can, because we don't get a lot of other benefits by continuing on with Warlock. The only advantage we might get is by getting an epic boon, but most of those don't really fit with the character that well anyways. So I'm going to do a multi-class just to focus on Pyra a little more. And we're going to multi-class into Sorcerer. Sorcerer gives us some cool benefits like innate sorceries, so it boosts the spell DC of your sorcerer spells by 1 and gives you advantage on all attack rolls with sorcerer spells you cast. And that innate sorcery ability lasts for a minute. You get Font of Magic, allowing you to get sorcery points, and you get a number of sorcery points equal to your level in Sorcerer, which you can use to trade for more spell slots, or you can spend them on meta magic, which we're going to grab Quicken Spell, allowing you to spend 2 sorcery points to cast a spell as a bonus action instead of an action. And then we'll also grab Transmuted Spell, so that way any spell that would do any sort of elemental damage, we can transmute it into fire damage for more Pyra stuff. Then take Sorcerer all the way to 3rd level. That way you can choose a Sorcerer subclass to grab the Draconic Sorcerer, focusing a bit more on fire stuff, because it gives you Draconic Resilience, so your hit point maximum is increased by 3 points. You have a different option for calculating armor class, but we already have medium armor, we don't really need that. And it gives you Draconic Spells, so you automatically get the spell Dragon's Breath, giving you a big source of elemental damage. And even beyond that, we get to choose a bunch of spells here. So we can grab the cantrips Firebolt and Sorcerer's Burst, which we can turn into fire, Absorb Elements to absorb some elemental damage and then dish it back out to our enemies, and then focus just on more fire stuff with Burning Hands to do a small AoE blast of fire, Agonizer's Scorcher to shoot out some more fire and more creatures, and Flame Blade, so you can actually summon a blade of fire. But just to not completely ignore the general fact that you're 2 different characters here, we'll also grab Magic Weapon. Just allows you to enhance your sword a little bit, giving it a +1 boost. And that's how I'd build both Pyra and Mythra into one cohesive character in Dungeons & Dragons. This is the 2nd/3rd build I've done from Xenoblade, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. If you want access to the character sheet for this build or any of my other builds, feel free to check out my Patreon, linked in the comments and description down below, where there's some additional spells that I didn't really mention here, but I think they can still help out the character. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to simultaneously play 2 different Blade characters from Xenoblade, playing Pyra and Mythra at the same time in Dungeons & Dragons. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, you might like one of my other videos, or at least YouTube thinks you will, so feel free to check out this one. It's the one that YouTube thinks you probably like the most, at least that you probably haven't seen yet. Plus it helps the channel, so go ahead and click it. That'd be super awesome of you.